views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
All right, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, the Bronx Advocates for Justice is the organization that not only gives back to the people of our city, but celebrates the legal community with events throughout the year. Our reporter was on hand at a recent gala near the Bronx County Courthouse. The president of the Bronx Advocates will be here with us on set. Next up, if you are a defendant in a criminal court, you may have a few options. Probation may be on the table, but what does that entail? Will your employment be affected? Will you still be able to apply for benefits? We will have a legal expert on set to help you make an intelligent decision. Well, as you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello, welcome to Today's Verdict, live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also, make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Today's Verdict and check us out at bronxnet.tv. Judges Nite is an annual event held by the Bronx Advocates for Justice during which judges are celebrated and honored for their work in the Bronx. We'll hear more about this event and what Bronx Advocates stand for from the president of the organization, Robert Wolf. Robert, I know you as Bob, but I want to thank you very much for being here. The Bronx Advocates for Justice, let's start from the beginning. How was it created, and what was the impetus?
Well, Mr. Shaw, Robert Shaw, and myself decided to have this organization about 5 years ago, David, and I thank you, David, for having me on the show. Basically, we were past presidents of the Bar Association, and as you are aware, the Bar Association is basically for attorneys. So we decided to have this organization, the Bronx Advocates of Justice, for the people of the Bronx, for the people of the community. And we decided to have events, give something back to the community that come to court every day with their problems, serve as jurors. And we decided for the legal organization to give back something to the Bronx community.
Let's go through some of the different things that the organization does throughout the community. Give us an example of what might be social justice on behalf of the organization.
Well, we do a myriad of things. We give out backpacks and to children who are commencing the school year. We provide turkeys and gift cards for ham and turkey throughout churches during the holiday season. We provide soccer training. We have 2 soccer courses every year for special needs children through the Bronx House. We do that in the summer. That's one of the hallmarks of the organization. We have a lot of volunteers for that.
How do you get the word out? I can understand how the attorneys can find out about it, but how would the community find out about it? Certainly the soccer events they'd love to go to, or the food drives. How does the community become aware of these events usually?
Well, the Bronx House, we go through the Bronx House, and they present on their website, and they request children to sign up for this program. And usually the children gets sold out, so to speak. And we usually have 30 or 40 special needs children. With respect to the backpacks and the turkeys, the father of each church that we provide for says the words, communicates.
And it gets out that way.
Yeah,
the donations, these things have to come from somewhere. The T-shirts have to come from somewhere. The backpacks, where does it come from?
Well, when we commenced the organization, we asked for a donation from firms and attorneys. And we do have Judges Night, which we charge for non-judges. And basically, that's where the money comes from. And Mr. Shaw and I basically oversee the accounts, and we provide the monies and the compensation to for the backpacks and for the turkeys and the hams. And we also gave out a donation to the victims of the Belmont fire recently. We also provide a contribution to the Legacy volleyball.
Now, from what I understand, there aren't really any other bar associations who really do this throughout the city, and not to the extent that the Bronx Advocates for Justice do that. Am I correct?
You're 100% right.
Nobody goes out to the community the way you do.
No. Well, the bar associations, the associations throughout the city of New York, are basically associations that were formed for the attorneys. This organization was not formed for the attorneys or basically for the legal field. We started this organization because we thought it would be important and basically essential for attorneys to give to the Bronx community.
Do individual attorneys who work with the Bronx Advocates for Justice or volunteer their time have certain expertise? I know. Listen, I know you've been a soccer referee. You've done things in terms of soccer. Are there attorneys who have specialized in certain areas who might say, well, we'll put a person in charge of the turkeys, we'll put somebody in charge of the dealing with certain churches? Is there somebody does everybody seem to have a niche, or does everybody really share the responsibilities?
Well, basically, different people have different responsibility. Lucille Barbado was
sure.
a founding member, is basically in charge of providing the backpacks. She has contact with certain the church parishes, and also with respect to the turkey and the ham give-outs during the holiday. Neil Valou is involved with that, as well as Lucille. With respect to the soccer, I've coached soccer and I've trained soccer, so
it's your thing.
but I get other people to help.
Listen, it's tough to run that back and forth so many times.
Yes, particularly at my age.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Judges Night. So important. That's really one of the main fundraisers that builds the organization financially for the year. What was the impetus, and how does it work, Judges Night, just so we understand?
Well, Bob and I decided that we should have an appreciation for the judges throughout the course of the year. And basically, the two of them. We have Judges Night at the Hard Rock on a yearly basis, usually in March or early April. And we request judges both from the civil, criminal, housing to come and appear. And the attorneys, we get the word out. And that particular Judges Night sells out very quickly. And most attorneys love coming to this because they get to speak on a one-to-one basis to the judges.
Listen, it was last week. It was a wonderful event. The viewers got a chance to take a look at it. And you only sell a limited amount if I remember correctly, there's only so many tickets you could sell. Not everybody can come a lot of times because it gets sold out very quickly. It's a hot place to go. Let's face it. A lot of people were there, and I'm sure a lot more people even wanted to go because it really was a fun event. Any particular things about the night last week that stand out for you?
Well, we basically, Judge Doris Gonzalez, the recently named administrative judge, spoke on behalf of Bronx Advocacy, and Judge Silver, who's the deputy chief administrative judge, they gave wonderful speeches, and it's basically a give back to the judges. And everybody enjoyed it. The feedback was tremendous. And we do have a Judge of the Year lunch.
Tell us about that.
At Antonio's on Arthur Avenue. And that also gets sold out very quickly because the venue is not
I believe that was
large.
Judge Miles last year.
Correct. And I won't give out
Don't give out who it's going to be, but that was...
But that's another give back to the judge. And we also honor a clerk, or a judge's law secretary. We honor one of both the judge and the clerk every year.
Listen,
as well.
the Bronx system can't work without the clerks, certainly without the judges, so it's nice that we give back as well. Switch gears for a second, talk a little bit about what you do, because it's very important for the viewers to know that you're also a full-time trial attorney. Tell us the kind of work that you do while you're in the Bronx courthouse, because I see you there all the time.
Well, I've been basically coming to the Bronx the last 37 years. I'm a partner at Rosenberg, Mink, Falco from Wolf. We have offices in Manhattan and the Bronx, and we specialize in medical malpractice and personal injury.
Now, in terms of cases coming through the door, because I know your firm does a lot of different things, the medical malpractice cases, do you find there's an uptick, downtick, or things have basically been staying the same the last 5 to 10 years, really?
Well, I think with respect to medical malpractice cases, we get a lot of calls on potential medical negligence. A result did not go in accordance to the patient's needs or requirements, and they feel that there may be some medical negligence or medical malpractice. So they call us. But as we all know, there's certain requirements in a medical malpractice case versus a general negligence.
That's very
case.
important for the viewers to know. So give us a quick rundown a little bit, just because
Well,
we don't want to let you go too fast.
On a medical malpractice case, you and I can't testify to medical malpractice. We can't testify to departures or deviations. What do you need? You need an expert. You need a physician, presumably in the same specialty that you're suing. It doesn't have to be, but it goes to the weight of their testimony. So you need an expert. You need another doctor to basically testify or opine that there was something wrong. And without that, you're not going to prevail on a medical malpractice.
And by the way,
case.
not every mistake is malpractice, obviously, but it's very important to speak to you so we could at least find out whether there is a potential claim.
Absolutely.
Okay, Bronx Advocates for Justice. When's the next event coming up? Give us a little bit of a...
The next event is in, I believe it's May 5th.
All right.
And it's in Antonio's, and we're honoring a judge.
But we don't know who that is yet.
We don't. We're voting on it as we speak.
As we speak,
And
okay.
we also have we're honoring a clerk who's been with us for a long time.
Okay. Lastly, you've been involved with the Bronx Advocates for a long time. You've been president of the Bronx County Bar. You've given so much back. What's your best memory, really, in the last, 5 to 10 years? Is it the social events with the Bronx Advocates? Is it being in the courtroom with some of the clients? I mean, this is the livelihood you've really picked. Where?
Well, I'll tell you, the fulfillment I have is basically helping my clients and basically helping other lawyers too. Attorneys know that I've been to the Bronx on a daily basis, and they ask me questions on a daily basis, and basically getting a good result for my client.
And you're giving back in all ways. And you're going to come back one time. Are you going to come back to the set?
Absolutely.
All right, that's what I like. All right, our Bronx Net cameras were able to catch the huge success of Judges Nite 2019. Arlene Makoko will tell us more. Let's take a look.
The borough's top legal eagles were the toast of the town at the Bronx's Hard Rock Cafe at Yankee Stadium for Judges Nite 2019.
It's a tremendous opportunity for all different kinds of people to get together and socialize outside of the adversarial setting of the courthouse.
Hitting a home run when it comes to planning the annual event, here are the Bronx Advocates for Justice, who say it's not just about networking, but bringing hope to middle and high school students in the neighborhoods they serve. Daniel Cassidy is the chairman.
There's Mr. Wolf speaking to schools. I know Bob Wolf and I and a bunch of people, Steve Baker, we do a couple soccer clinics every year for special needs children.
Together, 3 teams have been formed through Bronx Advocates for Justice. The founders are Robert Wolf and Bob Shaw.
Bronx has been very good to us as attorneys, and we wanted to do something to pay back the Bronx for that. And we've been doing that for the last 5 years.
We give backpacks to underprivileged students. We give turkeys and hams during the holiday season.
The response has been overwhelming, not just for children and parents, but also colleagues.
The organization, should I say, sponsors soccer events. They go to different churches. They give clothing to people who need it.
A trial attorney, David Lesch, host of Bronx Net's Today's Verdict, is also a member who helped organize the event.
It's more than a political organization. It's a justice organization, and that's why we celebrate the justices here tonight.
Evening was also an opportunity to reflect on the tremendous strides being made by leaders from the Bronx, creating optimism among young students in the classrooms they visit. And newly designated administrative judge in the Bronx, Justice Doris Gonzalez, is a great example of that. She was honored as the first woman of Hispanic descent to take on that role, and in so doing is helping to inspire countless Bronx kids.
It's been a difficult journey. I, like Judge Sotomayor, went to Cardinal Spellman High School. I grew up in the Boston Secor projects, went to Fordham University in the Bronx. Very difficult journey. Many people throughout the years felt that it wasn't for me and I shouldn't pursue that. But fortunately for me, I became stubborn and decided to go for it anyway.
From the benches, these Bronx judges want the public to know that they are now a part of the community for BronxNet. This is Arlene Makoko.
All right, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host, David Lesch. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet us at today's verdict. Well, probation, as the term is used in criminal court, is to rehabilitate the defendant and protect society while preventing any other criminal conduct. But is the option right for you? We'll learn more from attorney Stephen Goldman, who makes a second visit to our studio. Stephen, thanks for coming back.
You're welcome.
It's been too long, to be honest with you.
It has.
Let's back up a second. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of work you do, because the viewers haven't seen you for a while. Give us a little bit about your line of work.
Well, so I started as a public defender at the Legal Aid Society many years ago now, and for the last 12 years or so, I've been doing principally criminal defense and civil rights. By civil rights, I mean false arrest and excessive force cases.
Okay. Cases that have been coming into your office over that period of time that you've been in private practice, what do you seem to see more often than not? Where is the trend going? Low-level offenses, mid-level, something else, or just a whole range, really?
Well, it's interesting, actually, because as a public defender, most of my cases were drug offenses. Back I got started in '88. In the late 80s and the 90s, it was really all drugs all the time. What is most striking is that most of my cases now, literally most of my caseload in terms of my criminal caseload, is domestic violence cases.
Really?
Yeah.
Does probation, and the discussion of probation come up more often in domestic violence cases as opposed to low-level drug offender cases? When we talk about probation,
Yep.
Where are we really hearing it? What types of cases?
Well, probation is most often used in felony cases. Now, a domestic violence case can be a felony case. It could be a misdemeanor case. The more serious ones, obviously, are felony cases. In domestic violence cases, it's a fairly common way to resolve those cases. Probation is used when jail time is inappropriate, but some kind of community supervision is required. That's when probation.
Give me an example. So let's say there's been a domestic violence. Does there actually have to be an outcome? In other words, does there actually have to be some type of plea for there to be the probation? Tell the viewers how that really works.
Okay, so it's simple, really, in that regard. Yes, there does have to be an outcome. There has to be generally a conviction. And the conviction can be a result of a plea bargain, or it can be the result of being convicted after trial. The reality is that literally about 1% of the time cases go to trial. So that means 99% of the time cases are resolved before trial, either with disposition, plea, or disposal in some
Are the
way.
prosecutors, and now you're wearing a different hat now because you're a defense attorney, but are the prosecutors more apt to be offering probation as opposed to taking the cases to trial and really pushing for convictions and pushing for jail time? Does probation seem to be on their radars, I guess is really what I'm asking you.
Oh yeah, probation is certainly on the radar. Look, it's a very case-sensitive kind of thing. If you're charged with, go back to domestic violence. If you're charged with hitting your girlfriend or your wife or your mother or something of that sort, depending on whether the complainant, the individual who was injured, was hurt and how badly they were hurt, will determine whether jail is appropriate or whether probation is appropriate or whether something else is appropriate.
Now, probation I think, has certain levels to it. I think people think, oh, probation, I'm on probation, I get to do whatever I want to do still and go back to my house, go back to my school, go back to my friends. It doesn't work that way. Let's talk about what probation means, really, because when it's on the table and you take it, you really do have to understand all the terms, right?
Oh,
should I say?
yes.
So let's talk about probation, really.
Sure. So, look, probation it curtails, it limits your freedom. Now, obviously, it doesn't limit your freedom nearly as much as being in jail limits your freedom, but it's certainly a limit on your freedom. There are all kinds of things you can't do when you're on probation. You know, you can't associate with people who have been convicted of crimes. You can't associate with gang members. You can't do drugs. If you have a drinking problem, you can't drink. If it's a DWI, you might need an ignition interlock device on your car. So there are lots of things you have to do when you're on probation, including, needless to say, visiting your probation officer.
So would you say it's a case-by-case sensitive in terms of what your necessary terms of probation would be?
Well, yes and no. In every probation case, there are certain things that has to be done. You've got to go to your probation officer. You've got to stay out of trouble. You've got to stay employed or be in school, those sorts of things. But then there are other more specific requirements depending on the specific case.
Healthcare providers, so important to get you where you need to be in society, and a lot of times some of the crimes that are committed are done so because those who commit the crimes have some underlying mental health issues that I think should be addressed by society. Are they being addressed while they're on probation? Is that part of the terms of probation? You need to be evaluated by, this particular counselor or that particular counselor because you're making wrong life decisions. I mean, I would think that would be so important.
It is actually very important, and that absolutely is something that is dealt with on probation. Let's assume you have a mental health history. Then you may be obligated to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. If you've got a drug issue, then you may be obligated to see somebody get counseling for your drug abuse issue or your alcohol abuse issue.
How long is the usual term for probation? Is it another case-by-case basis, really, or is it a year, 2 years?
Yeah,
how does it
so
work?
it's ordinarily for a misdemeanor, normally for a Class A misdemeanor, the higher level of misdemeanor, normally 3 years. For a lower level misdemeanor, normally 1 year, and for a felony, normally 5 years.
Let's give the viewers some real understanding of the particular crimes themselves. What might attach to how long probation would be? So, drugs. Let's say low-level drug offenses. You're caught taking drugs yourself. All right, and you're not selling, but you're taking.
Right.
Okay, misdemeanor or whatever that would be.
Right.
What kind of probation would that?
3 years.
That would be 3 years.
Yeah.
Selling drugs.
5 years.
5 years. Okay. Can this be negotiated, or is it's 3, 5? That's just the way it is.
Pretty much that's the way it is.
Okay. So we started off with sexual violence or violence against domestic violence. Probation there.
Well, that's a little bit different. The sexual violence is actually a longer period of probation. Those are taken more seriously in the sense of they want a longer period of supervision. So if it's a misdemeanor, it's 6 years of probation. If it's a felony, rather than 5 years for the normal felony, it's 10 years.
Okay, let's get back into the real world now. You've pled, you have probation, or you've been given probation, but you have a job, you want to get a job, you want to get housing. Can anybody find out that you're on probation and prevent you from being able to do some of these things while you're getting your life back together?
That's actually a very good question. One big issue that's going on right now is whether criminal convictions should be sealed. And sealing is something in New York that's recently come around. It's been passed by the legislature. It now exists for certain classes of people. So if you're among the class that can get their case sealed, you can apply to the court to have that sealed. But ordinarily, if you're on probation, yes, your employer can find out about that.
Because it almost looks like it's a circular argument. In other words, we could put somebody on probation. It gets on a database. future employers find out about it, future housing find out about it, no employment, no housing. What do? You do that act, or you commit a theft again because you need to, and you're back into the system. So it's almost defeats the purpose. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. The sad reality is that for people who are, ensnared in the criminal justice system, the employers find out, housing finds out, you may get kicked out of your public housing, you may lose your job. That's the sad reality.
And and also, from a society perspective, this is costing us also a lot of money when the people are incarcerated. From what my notes tell me, it's almost $110,000 a year. That's just to incarcerate, say, a teenager who does something low level. Do you find, because you're really in the criminal defense community more than I am at all, do you find that prosecutors understand the big picture and they're trying to do the right thing by getting these defendants not being put in jail and given probation or parole or whatever it is?
Well, so...
Because you were a prosecutor.
No, I was always a defense lawyer.
You were a defense lawyer,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
but you've
But
dealt with prosecutors your entire life.
Yes,
and
my
you're dealing
entire
with them
life.
now.
That's correct. It's a lot of experience with prosecutors. So the short answer is that institutional pressures require really that they offer non-incarceratory pleas fairly often, and that they avoid trial. As I said, trials happen about literally 1% of the time.
Okay, which leads me to judges.
Yep.
How do the judges feel? Because the judges ultimately are involved in this whole procedure of deciding whether somebody should get probation or parole. I mean, they have to sign off on it, am I correct?
Yes.
Are some judges not signing off on it? Or some judges saying, you know what, probation's not good enough for you. Sorry, I'm not going to accept that. This case is going to trial.
It does happen. That's a rarity.
It is a rarity.
The reality is that the way the legislature has set up sentencing, most of the sentencing discretion is in the hands of the DAs, not in the judges.
Okay, but we don't have that much time. But very quick, by the way, where do we find you? Somebody's watching right now. They may have an issue with being arrested or a family member. Where do they find you, by the way?
www.goldmancriminaldefense.com.
Okay, now, tips. Someone's watching.
Yeah.
They're scared. One of their family members got picked up. They have a court date. Give them a little advice. What do they do? Best you can.
Well,
Call you, obviously, but some advice.
Even before calling me, the very first thing, if the police contact you, never, ever, ever speak to the police. It isn't in your best interest.
Even if you think you know what you're talking about.
Even if you're a lawyer, don't talk to the police.
Even if you're a lawyer, that's right.
Contact another lawyer. Don't talk to the police.
Okay. You going to come back?
Happy
It's been
to.
too long. I mean, I think 7, 8 years. You got to come back. There's a lot more that the viewers are going to want to know.
Happy to.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us and, of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also, remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you would like to see on a future edition of today's verdict, feel free to contact me at David Lesch at bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. For myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.